The rain had been falling for hours, soaking everything in its path. Gray clouds hung low in the sky, casting a dull shadow over the quiet neighborhood. Cars passed by with their wipers working overtime, splashing through puddles that filled the streets. Most people were in a rush to get home, umbrellas held tightly, heads down, feet moving quickly. But on the corner of Maple and Fifth, something small and out of place huddled beside a rusted lamppost. It was a puppy. No more than a few months old, he was thin, soaked to the bone, and trembling from the cold. His fur, once a creamy white, was now matted with mud. His eyes scanned every face that passed by. They weren't angry eyes, just tired and searching. He didn't bark or whine. He didn't run into traffic or chase after people. He just waited. Every few minutes, he'd lift his head, ears twitching at the sound of footsteps or voices. When someone came near, his tail would wag faintly, cautiously hopeful. But the footsteps always moved on. No one stopped. Maybe someone had left him there. Maybe he had been lost for longer than he knew. All he understood was that this spot, the corner under the flickering lamppost, was where he'd last felt safe. So he stayed, waiting for a familiar voice, waiting for someone to come back. The rain didn't let up. The puddle around his paws grew deeper, but he didn't move. He curled into himself, shivering with each gust of wind. His ribs showed beneath his soaked fur, and his legs looked too small to support his weight for long. Hunger had set in a day ago, and now it was just part of the dull ache in his body. A woman walked by with a takeout bag. She slowed, glanced at him, then picked up her pace when her phone rang. A teenage boy on a bicycle looked straight at the puppy, then turned his head as if ashamed. A delivery driver honked impatiently at someone double park and never saw the tiny figure hidden in the shadow. Still, the puppy waited. At one point, a man tossed a half-eaten sandwich on the sidewalk nearby. The puppy dragged himself toward it, sniffed it, and gently picked off a piece of meat before retreating to his post under the bench. He ate slowly, more out of habit than hunger. Then he curled back up. Night began to fall, and the rain turned to a soft drizzle. Streetlights blinked on. The sound of the world changed, quieter but colder. The puppy looked around once more, eyes dull with exhaustion. No one was coming. Not tonight. But still he stayed, because even in the storm, even in the cold, something inside him refused to give up. Someone was out there. He could feel it. He just had to wait a little longer. The second day came with heavier rain and colder wind. The sky stayed dark from morning to night, and puddles swelled into small ponds on the sidewalks. The little puppy had stopped reacting to every noise. His ears still twitched at the sound of laughter or a distant bark, but he no longer lifted his head with hope. It was as if even his thoughts had grown quieter. His fur clung to his skin like a wet rag, and his small paws were raw from standing on rough concrete. The space beneath the bench was his only shelter, barely shielding him from the elements, but it was better than nothing. It was his corner, and for some reason, he refused to leave it. He was waiting for something or someone. Each passerby felt like a possibility. An older man in a raincoat slowed down, staring at the shivering figure under the bench. He hesitated, then pulled his hood tighter and kept walking. A young woman holding groceries glanced down at the pup and frowned. She even took a step in his direction, but a car horn startled her, and she quickly moved along. The puppy didn't chase after her. He simply laid his head back down, watching the raindrops slide from the edge of the bench above him. On the third day, the sky broke open again. It wasn't just rain anymore. It was a downpour. The water splashed hard against the pavement, and rivers formed along the curbs. The puppy was so weak he could barely keep his head up. He tried to stand, but his legs trembled beneath him. He sank back down, curling tighter, his tail limp. A pair of boys walked by, laughing and kicking through puddles. One of them spotted the puppy and pointed. "Dude, look," he said. The other shrugged. "Probably a stray. Nasty thing." They kept walking. The puppy closed his eyes. As night crept in again, his world grew blurry. He wasn't sure how many hours had passed. Hunger had turned into a dull emptiness. The cold didn't even sting anymore. It was just there, like the silence. He dreamed, but only in flashes. A warm blanket, a bowl of food, the hand that gently scratched behind his ears. But when he woke up, the dream was gone. Only the rain remained. Still, something made him stay. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was hope. Whatever it was stronger than the urge to run or cry. It held him to that corner like an invisible thread, thin but unbreakable. By the end of that third day, the puppy had no name, no collar, no home. But he still had something that refused to die out completely. A spark. And just as it began to flicker its weakest, fate was already on its way. Someone was coming. The morning of the fourth day began with a fragile kind of light. The storm clouds had finally drifted away, leaving behind a gray, damp silence. Everything glistened. Rooftops, sidewalks, even tree branches, as though the entire town had been dipped in silver. For most, it was just another wet morning. But for the little puppy curled beneath the bench, it was another day of waiting. His body was still, barely rising with each breath. The puddle beside him had begun to dry, but his fur was still damp, his limbs stiff from cold and stillness. His eyes remained open, half-lidded and glassy, as though he'd forgotten what he was even looking for. Then, out of the quiet, came the soft, rhythmic squeak of stroller wheels. Down the sidewalk came a young woman, dressed in a loose hoodie and yoga pants, her face relaxed but focused. She walked with the kind of pace that suggested she had done this many times before. Pushing the stroller steadily, she hummed a gentle tune under her breath. Inside the stroller sat a toddler, barely 2 years old, with wide brown eyes and curls that bounced with every bump. His name was Leo, and everything in the world was still new to him. Birds, trees, shadows, each one a tiny miracle. But as the stroller passed the bench, something made Leo stop babbling. His little body stiffened, and he pointed with a tiny hand. "Doggy," he said softly. The mother slowed down but didn't stop at first. She glanced toward the direction he pointed, thinking maybe he saw a squirrel or something in the bushes. But when she followed his gaze, her eyes landed on the limp, dirty shape curled beneath the bench. Her heart paused. She hadn't noticed it at all until now. It looked like a dog, small, soaked, still. For a moment, she wondered if it was alive. She stepped closer, cautiously, gripping the stroller handle as Leo reached out again. "Doggy," he repeated. His voice was quiet, but his eyes were fixed on the little creature, as if he already knew it mattered. The woman crouched down slowly. As she got closer, the puppy opened one eye. His head barely moved, but his tail tapped against the wet concrete, just once. Her breath caught in her throat. The puppy was alive. Barely, but alive. And even in that state, he was wagging his tail. Not barking, not growling, just gently wagging. As if to say, "I'm still here." I waited. Leo giggled and reached out his hand. The puppy's nose twitched. Slowly, with trembling effort, he lifted his head and sniffed the air near the toddler's fingers. The woman didn't speak. She looked from her son to the dog, and back again. Something unspoken passed between them, a shared moment of kindness, of connection. The puppy didn't need words. He only needed someone to finally stop. And Leo had done just that. The woman stayed crouched beside the bench, her eyes locked on the trembling creature in front of her. She could see every rib, every shaky breath. The puppy looked so fragile, like a gust of wind could carry him away. And yet, even now, he was trying to stay awake, trying to move, trying to connect. "Mommy," Leo said, his little voice cutting through the silence. "He's cold." She looked at her son. His small hand was still reaching out, and the puppy had leaned forward just enough to press his nose to Leo's fingertips. It was the gentlest touch, but it carried more weight than 1,000 words. In that moment, something clicked deep in her chest. She took a step closer, slowly reaching for the puppy. He didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes fluttered shut, as though her nearness alone was enough to ease his fear. Carefully, she lifted him, cradling him in her arms. He didn't resist. He was too weak to struggle. But more than that, he didn't want to. She was warm. She smelled safe. His body, once tense with uncertainty, went limp against her chest. Leo clapped softly, smiling like the sun had come out. The woman didn't have a plan. She hadn't left the house that morning expecting to rescue a stray. She was just going on her usual morning walk with her son. But life had a way of turning ordinary moments into extraordinary ones. As she wrapped the puppy in Leo's spare stroller blanket, she felt something unfamiliar. A pull, quiet but firm. This wasn't someone else's problem. Not anymore. "We'll get you help," she whispered, pressing the blanket snugly around the little body. "I promise." Leo leaned forward from his seat, peering at the bundle in his mother's arms. "Do he go home?" he asked hopefully. She looked at her son, then back at the puppy. His head rested against her arm, eyes closed, but his tail wagged, slowly, rhythmically. "Maybe," she said softly. "Let's take him somewhere warm first." She gently placed the wrapped puppy beside Leo in the stroller. He shifted slightly, curling into the folds of the blanket. Leo held out a small toy from his lap, a stuffed giraffe, and tucked it next to the pup. The gesture was simple, but it made the woman's eyes sting. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the street still glistened under the morning light as they turned the stroller around and headed back the way they came. Cars passed. People walked by. But for the first time in days, the little puppy wasn't alone. He was going somewhere. He was with someone. No one else had stopped. But one small hand had reached out. And that had changed everything. The walk back home felt longer than usual, but the air was lighter now. The clouds had finally given way to pale sunlight, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees lining the quiet streets. The woman kept one hand on the stroller and the other resting gently over the puppy, wrapped snugly in the stroller blanket beside her son. The little pup was barely awake, his eyes blinking slowly, but there was something different in his expression now, something softer. He wasn't flinching at every sound or curling in fear. He was still, breathing shallowly, but peacefully. And Leo, sitting inches away, hadn't taken his eyes off him. "Mommy, he's sleepy," Leo said, his voice filled with innocent concern. "He's very tired, sweetheart," she replied. "He's been through a lot, but he's safe now." They reached their front porch, and she quickly unlocked the door, then guided the stroller inside. The house was warm and filled with the soft scent of cinnamon from a candle she'd forgotten to blow out earlier. She cleared a spot on the couch and carefully lifted the puppy into her arms. He didn't make a sound, just curled into her chest like he belonged there. She laid him on a folded towel and gently dried his fur with another. His body was fragile, but he didn't resist. When she reached for his tiny paws, he gave the faintest of sighs and leaned into her touch. The trust came quickly, not because it was earned, but because he had nothing left to give but hope. Leo toddled over with a juice box in one hand and a stuffed elephant in the other. "He can have this," he offered. "It's soft." His mother smiled, her heart swelling. "That's very kind, Leo." They sat together, watching the puppy rest. For the first time since Leo had been born, she saw something in her son that went beyond curiosity or playfulness. It was empathy, deep, instinctive compassion. Somehow, her little boy had recognized pain in a creature who couldn't speak, and he had decided it mattered. An hour passed. The woman made a call to the local vet and explained the situation. They had an opening that afternoon. She bundled the puppy again, this time with a towel warmed in the dryer, and held him close as they got in the car. Leo sat in the back seat, humming quietly, his feet swinging above the floor mat. The puppy's nose twitched at the scent of warmth and security. The woman could feel his tiny heartbeat against her chest, steady but weak. "We'll find out what you need," she whispered. "We're going to fix this. I promise." For the first time in days, the little puppy wasn't just waiting. He was going somewhere. And for reasons he didn't yet understand, he was no longer alone. The veterinary clinic sat on the corner of Main Street, tucked between a flower shop and a quiet cafe. It had bright blue shutters and a welcoming sign above the door that read Paws and Whiskers Animal Care. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of lavender and clean floors, and soft instrumental music played over the speakers. It was the kind of place that made you feel like everything might turn out okay. The woman stepped in with the bundled puppy pressed gently against her chest. Leo walked beside her, holding her hand, his eyes wide with quiet concern. A receptionist looked up from her desk and gave them a warm smile. "Hi there. How can we help?" "We found this little guy," the woman said softly. "He's not in good shape. I don't think he's eaten properly in days." The receptionist's smile turned serious. "Let me get the vet. Right away." Within moments, they were ushered into an exam room. The walls were painted soft yellow, and a small poster of different dog breeds hung above the counter. Leo climbed onto a chair, clutching his stuffed elephant, while the woman gently unwrapped the towel and placed the puppy on the table. He didn't protest. Dr. Patel, a kind-eyed veterinarian with gentle hands, entered and immediately got to work. She listened to the puppy's heartbeat, checked his temperature, and ran her fingers through his damp fur. "He's dehydrated," she said, "and very underweight. But he's young, and there's no sign of broken bones or disease. He just needs food, warmth, and rest." The woman let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "So, he's going to be okay?" Dr. Patel smiled. "Yes, with care and time, he'll recover just fine." Leo beamed from the chair. "He can come home with us now." Dr. Patel looked at the woman. "You're planning to keep him?" She hesitated only a second. "Yes, if no one comes forward, we want to." "Then I'll get you some starter supplies. Puppy food, a feeding schedule, and some antibiotics to help his digestion. You're giving him a real chance." The puppy rested his head on the towel, eyes fluttering shut as if he knew he was finally safe. The fear that had clung to him like wet fur seemed to be slipping away. In its place was something warmer, something gentler. Hope. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Patel handed Leo a small paper bag with a smile. "For your new friend." Leo peeked inside and gasped. A puppy bowl. He turned to the sleepy dog in his mom's arms and whispered, "You've got your own stuff now. You're part of us." Outside, the sky was clearing for real now, blue stretching wide across the horizon. As they walked to the car, the puppy lifted his head ever so slightly and looked around. For the first time in his young life, he wasn't just surviving. He was beginning to live. The sun filtered softly through the living room windows, warming the wooden floors and casting golden streaks across the walls. It was the first truly bright morning in days, and the house felt different, like it had exhaled a long, quiet breath. The little puppy was curled up on a folded blanket in the corner, a small bowl of water beside him, and a stuffed elephant tucked near his paws. His breathing had grown stronger overnight, no longer shallow or labored. Every now and then, his tail gave a slow, contented wag. Leo sat cross-legged a few feet away, his eyes full of wonder as he watched the puppy sleep. "He needs a name," he said suddenly, turning to his mom. "He's part of the family now." She smiled from the kitchen, where she was preparing a gentle meal for their new guest: boiled chicken, plain rice, and a special formula the vet had recommended. "You're right," she said, walking over and sitting beside her son. "He deserves a name. What do you think it should be?" Leo tilted his head, thinking hard. He looked at the puppy, then at his elephant, then at the soft sunlight streaming in through the windows. "Sunny," he said finally, beaming. "Because he came when the sun came back." The woman looked at the tiny bundle of fur resting peacefully in the light. "Sonny," she repeated. "That's perfect." As if he knew they were talking about him, the puppy stirred, his ears twitching and eyes blinking open. He looked around sleepily before settling his gaze on Leo. When Leo leaned in closer, Sonny gave a faint wag of his tail and nudged the boy's hand with his nose. "Hi, Sonny," Leo whispered, gently stroking the top of his head. From that moment, the name stuck. Sonny spent the rest of the day exploring little by little, his steps shaky but determined. He sniffed at the rug, peeked under the table, and eventually made his way to Leo's room, where he curled up beside a row of stuffed animals, as if he'd always belonged there. Each small step was a triumph. A few bites of food, a playful tail wag, a nap with his chin resting on Leo's shoe, all signs that the fear and loneliness were beginning to fade. That night, as the stars appeared and the house grew quiet, the woman tucked Leo into bed. Sonny lay at the foot, curled in a perfect circle, his chest rising and falling with calm breaths. "Mommy," Leo said sleepily. Sonny waited so long. She kissed his forehead and looked at the pup. Yes, he did, but he found his way home. In the stillness of the night, Sonny lifted his head for a moment, his ears flicking toward the sound of Leo's steady breathing. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel lost. He felt found. Weeks passed, and with each new day, Sonny grew stronger. His fur, once matted and dull, now gleamed in the sunlight. His ribs slowly disappeared beneath healthy weight, and his eyes, those deep, soulful eyes, sparkled with life. He had discovered something new in this quiet home with warm blankets and laughter. Joy. Leo and Sonny became inseparable, whether it was chasing bubbles in the backyard or lying together on the rug during story time. The little boy and the rescued pup shared an unspoken bond. It wasn't just playfulness, it was loyalty. A connection that had begun the moment a tiny hand reached out and touched a trembling nose beneath a rainy bench. Sonny followed Leo everywhere. When Leo giggled, Sonny wagged his tail. When Leo cried, Sonny rested his chin on the boy's lap and stayed there, still and loyal. If Leo wandered too far in the garden, Sonny barked gently, nudging him back toward safety. He wasn't just a pet. He was a protector, a friend. The woman watched them often, her heart full. She'd never expected a stray dog to become such a part of their lives. But now she couldn't imagine a single day without Sonny's paws patting across the floor or his warm body curled beside Leo at night. He had brought something into their home, something soft and healing. One sunny afternoon, they took a family photo in the park. Leo sat on a picnic blanket, grinning wide, with Sonny beside him, tail wagging in a blur. The woman set the camera timer and rushed to kneel beside them just in time. The shutter clicked, capturing a perfect moment. A little boy, a smiling mother, and the dog who had waited in the rain for someone to care. Later that evening, the photo was printed and framed. It found a home on the living room wall, right above Sonny's favorite nap spot. Every time they passed it, Leo would point and say proudly, "That's our Sonny. He didn't have a home, but we found him." "No," his mother would reply gently, brushing a hand through his hair. "He found us." Sometimes life doesn't unfold with grand plans. Sometimes it happens in quiet moments. A glance, a pause, a tiny hand offering kindness when the world is turned away. That was how a nameless, abandoned puppy became Sonny. That was how a toddler became his hero. Sonny never returned to the streets. He never had to wait in the rain again. Instead, he spent his days chasing butterflies, dozing in sunbeams, and curling up beside the boy who saved him. His journey had started in the cold and the dark, but it had led him exactly where he was meant to be. He was no longer lost. He was home. Forever.